Hi, I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Charlene. Welcome to Empowered, Life Lessons of Everyday Women.
Each episode, you're going to meet an amazing woman who has struggled through challenges both in her home life and work life and has become very successful. Meet Ruffin. Remember to have fun along the way. Ruffin has had over 25 years in marketing and customer support, setting up a satellite office in Prague and managing hundreds of people globally. Understand how learning through failure can help you succeed. So grab a cup of coffee, get in a comfy chair, and let's talk to Ruffin. Good morning, Ruffin.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
If you were able to go back and talk to your 20-year-old self and give her a little piece of advice, what would that be?
Don't forget to have fun along the way. I think that often we get caught up in career, family, and we lose sight of ourselves, especially as women. And I think one way to stay connected with who you are and what brings you joy is to play and find activities that feel playful to you. And I think it'll do two things, right? It helps find some balance and kind of restore your energy, tap into creativity, and just keeps you grounded and connected. And I think early in my career, I at times lost sight of that. I lost sight of reminding myself and taking the time to play.
I think many of us do that all the time, honestly. I think when we get out of school, we're going to go and we want to just succeed and we just forget to have fun.
Just to breathe. Sometimes you just need to step back and breathe.
Yeah.
I wish I'd learned yoga techniques earlier in my career because I've used them more later on. Who was your biggest influence?
It's interesting. I've actually thought a lot about this over time. And it's a question that's asked, when people are asking, whether it's in a panel, who's your influence? And I have to say that for me, it is more a trait than it is one individual. So I find this trait attractive in a lot of individuals that I've crossed paths with. And that is the ability to really know who you are, what is important to you, and what you want to go after. And whether that is my close friend who has known for a very long time that she wants to be CEO and she has pursued that single-mindedly throughout her career, seeking out the experiences and the opportunities that will allow her to attain that role. And she's absolutely on track to getting there. Or it's my dad who really wanted to learn how to paint and has spent hours upon hours and will have an exhibit in a museum as a result of his efforts. And so just find individuals who really have a passion and go after that. Very, very inspiring. And so there's several in my life that I look to. And I think part of the reason I find it so inspiring is that I'm not innately one of those individuals, right? I really have to sit with what it is that I want. And I feel that I've been very lucky in my career, but I also feel that a lot of times those opportunities aren't something necessarily I have gone after, but opportunities that have presented themselves to me that I respond to. And so for me, what I find very inspiring are the people who really, really know what they want to go after. And as I kind of approach this middle point of my life and career, I'm sitting more and more with that. What do I want to do next? And not maybe leave it as much up to, I don't want to say happenstance.
Yeah, but what kind of falls in your lap kind of thing. It's interesting because I've always, I looked at what do I want to do, and I kind of did a path, and I like the path that I followed. But as I've told my kids, you don't necessarily know what's around the next door because you haven't experienced a lot of stuff. So a lot of things that might have fallen into my lap were because I created experiences to allow them to fall into my lap.
Absolutely. And you're prepared, right? I mean, you worked hard. Those experiences don't just appear. They appear because of hard work and putting, the connections you make and the results you deliver. So it's not that I believe that it's just right. The luck favors the prepared, right? And so I do think there's a lot of truth to that. I also really like individuals, though, that say, I want this. And they have a really single-minded approach to going after that. And there's a beauty to it. It allows them to say yes to the things that bring them closer to that goal and no to the things that don't. And I think there's real power in that. And that's something that I'm working to tap into, because I admire that trait, and there's nothing stopping me from, really sitting with what I want, or there's nothing stopping you from really sitting with what you want and then going after it. It provides such, I think, clarity, but it's scary. There's to really sit with yourself and go after those things that you want to go after. So
it's interesting. We've talked to several women who further into their career ended up going back to the things that they dreamed about doing when they were younger, right? One of the women, her podcast just dropped, but she pursued pottery. And it was part of her, her creative side. That's awesome to be able to go back and do that for yourself, I think is fabulous. So you have 2 master's degrees.
I do.
One is in marketing. Is the other in education?
It is. It was in adult education and training. So I was really interested in, I thought I would go into learning and development for a company, and ended up actually gravitating more towards the marketing and the business side. But I think what's been super interesting in my career is that I've really drawn on the L&D training and experience that I had through grad school. It really helped me to connect and develop my teams in ways that I think would not have been available to me had I not had that background. But I did go for marketing.
So marketing is a big area. What type of work did you do, and what were some of the challenges you experienced in your marketing career?
I started in strategy and planning. So did a lot of work around 5-year plans, understanding what the direction of the market, the competitive landscape, how companies could position themselves or products could position themselves to be successful within that landscape. I really enjoyed strategy and planning as an analyst and did a lot of work in that space. That was the first 25% of my career. My challenge in that space was that I found that it was frustrating to present strategic plans and a roadmap to teams and see those teams not executing. And so for me, the draw actually was being able to translate strategy, vision into an operational plan and execute against that. That's what I really enjoyed, was being able to bring that vision to life. And so ended up shifting from an S&P space into more of an operational space, and have really enjoyed that shift. That was a better fit for me.
It's amazing. I also did long range planning, but I did it forecasting and whatnot in a previous life. What I am surprised about is how many people, companies, organizations don't have a 5-year plan. They don't know what direction they're going with. And that kind of blows my mind, because especially that, you kind of need a roadmap, in my mind, to be successful. Because if you're a corporation, it's one thing to be an individual and wait for something to fall in your lap. It's another thing to be a company and wait for something to fall in your lap. It just amazes me. So
I know that you said that was 25% of you, the first part of your career. How did you end up getting into customer support?
Well, it's an interesting story. So my husband and I had decided that we wanted to move to the East Coast. And I had been planning on putting in my notice, because I knew at the time that companies did not allow remote work, and I did not think that that would be an opportunity for me. And this is going to sound crazy, but I was in a meeting with my VP at the time, and she happened to mention that she was having a really hard time hiring marketing specialists in Prague, where the company I worked for wanted to set up offices. And so I thought to myself, I'll go to Prague for you. I have no problem going and helping you hire your analysts, get the team up and running. I'm still in marketing at this time. And she looked at me, she's like, Ruffin, aren't you moving? I'm like, yeah, I think, we're packing up the house right now, but let me call my husband and see if he'd be willing to kind of take a detour and we could, spend 6 months in Prague. We'll hire, train the team, and then, kind of decide what to do from there. She's like, all right. And so that actually ended up happening. Like, believe it or not, it was very fortuitous timing in one way because we'd already sold our house. We were packing up our belongings. We really had nothing tying us. And so we ended up moving to Prague. And long story short, I very quickly ascertained the reason that she was having a hard time hiring people is that we actually, the aerospace division had no legal entity in which to hire people. And the sister company at the time, which was Controls, did not want to hire aerospace employees into their legal entity. And so what was supposed to be a 6-month assignment turned into a 3.5-year expat role where I helped stand up the legal entity for aerospace, hired the first 150 employees. At that point, they asked me if I'd be willing to be the site leader and consolidate their customer support operations for the region and stand up effectively a call center.
So, as somebody who also lived overseas for a couple of years as an expat, so was your husband able to get a job as well? Because I know in my situation, my husband had the main job. We happened to go to Southeast Asia, and I was actually able to acquire a job when I was over there for a specialty in marketing that they didn't have at the time. So they were able to get me a work permit. It's very usually when one goes as the other is as an expat, then the other is unemployed. So was he able to work?
So he actually was a pilot by training.
Okay.
And had a lot of experience and understood the aerospace industry just through being a pilot. And he was hired on. They were hiring rapidly at the time. And he was hired on as a project manager. And so worked most of the time that we were there as a project program manager for one of the business units. He never worked for me, never worked in my chain of command. There was no conflict of interest.
So when you were going over there and you were hiring people, it was for Honeywell. They have a very different culture maybe than what is typical in maybe Eastern Europe or Europe in general. Did you have a problem getting people to understand the culture? Did the culture shift in that customer support?
I think the most challenging was at the time we were still as a company moving towards an enterprise solution. And a lot of the information that a support agent would need was embedded in legacy systems. So the hardest part was actually training individuals across a wide array of systems to understand, where parts were, understand how to get those to customers if they needed to be expedited. So it wasn't so much. So there was a skill set element that was challenging, and there was also an element of the biggest shift in terms of culture was just Honeywell is a very fast-paced organization for a company that has been around for as long as it is. It has still a very entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is part of why it is as successful as it is and continues to be successful. I think that mindset, especially in Prague, was hard to find. These, a lot of the thinking was very what I would call 0 or 1. It's possible, it's not possible. And so hiring individuals that could think creatively and find solutions, even when it didn't look possible, was our biggest challenge.
Kind of think outside the box from what they were typically doing.
And that just wasn't a very prevalent trait. If you think about it, the Czech Republic had, fairly recently, had the Velvet Revolution and it became independent from it. Just that mindset of being able to think critically without having someone top down tell you what to think or how to think was the hardest. And true story, I went to work one day And it was a really cold day. And so they were burning a lot of coal. And the air pollution was horrible. You could see it. The air was yellow. It was just, and you could feel it in your lungs. And I commented to one of my colleagues, I'm like, oh my gosh, do you believe the pollution today? And her response was, there's no pollution. I'm like, you can literally look out the window and you can see the pollution. There's no pollution. And about 2 hours later, she came up to my desk. She's like, I owe you an apology. Why? She's like, you were right about the pollution. The government just issued a high pollution warning encouraging. So that was my biggest challenge. And
That's interesting. So you had your first child when you were overseas as well.
I did.
Did you have any issues, challenges, or whatever, having a child overseas versus, well, you wouldn't have known it was your first child, so you don't know probably comparison-wise, but
I had a lot of very concerned parents. Are you sure you don't want to come back? And I very gently pointed out that the Czech Republic had a lower infant mortality rate than the US. And so I was not actually worried. Also, my mortality rate as a mother was also lower. And what has been interesting is that it was a fabulous pregnancy, fabulous experience. And yeah, so for me, it was really not an issue at all. Yeah, it was a good experience all around.
Did you have any issues balancing your work and home life? Because it sounds like you were quite busy, and kind of how did you deal with that, or how did you face those challenges?
I think career-wise, this was one of the highlights of my career, but also one of the hardest points of time in my career. And to be frank, for the first year and a half, I did the best that I could. And it was hard. My job was, at that point, I was a regional director of customer and product support. We were in the process of launching SAP. We were consolidating. And so it required a good deal of travel from me, almost weekly. And it was a real strain. It was a strain on my marriage. It was a strain on me emotionally, but also mentally. And in the end, I don't know that I was successful in finding that balance. I actually hit a wall pretty hard where I was not succeeding in my role. I was not able to give it what I needed to give it. I did not feel that I was succeeding as a mother or as a wife. And I actually, the same VP that sent me to hire and stand up the marketing team reached out and basically gave me some tough love and said, you have a couple of options here. You can leave the company. You can come back and I will work to help find a role for you. You can continue in your role. You just need to make some changes and you need to make them very, very quickly. And so it really was a tough love situation. And I will forever be thankful to Michelle for reaching out a hand, because I think she saw me struggling. She saw me become someone I wasn't, right? Like in that time period of time, I became angry. I was not in a good place. And so what I elected to do was go back. And I ended up taking a step back. I let go of, having the head of customer and product support for a region. I took a smaller role, but that role is what allowed me to become a better leader. It allowed me to really understand what it meant to lead a team, to manage managers, to set a vision and go after it. When I went to Prague, I went as an individual contributor. I left Prague managing a team of over 150 employees with 5+ direct reports. And I wasn't equipped to make the change quite as rapidly as the company needed me to. And so in taking that step back, I actually was able to gain the skills that in the end allowed me to work for Uber and lead an 1,800 person organization. And so it's something that I actually share often with my leadership team when they ask me, how do you do it? How do you balance work and family? And my response is sometimes you do it by taking a step back, and that's okay. But yeah,
It also sounds like your boss at the time had the insight to give you the options to make a choice that maybe you weren't even able to see that was happening to you. So she was the reflection that you needed to see. And that's a good thing. We talked about it on previous podcasts with our listeners about sometimes when you get either, I'm not going to call it criticism, but somebody gives you input, and it's not what you want to hear. It helps you grow, and it's how you take that information and are able to process it and put it back into your life. And it's actually a good thing. And that's what it sounds like.
Right. Well, and she knew you well enough to know that there was a change, right? If you hadn't known her previously, she may not have realized that there was a change and been able to step in and say something. It's interesting because I was a supervisor, then I went back to individual contributor, supervisor, manager, whatever, back and forth, back and forth. I did that based on the needs of my family at the time, because managing people took so much more out of me. When my kids needed me the most, I became an individual contributor. I never regretted that. I chose it for my own sanity, pretty much.
I think, also having been in a management position and having a team that I had to manage in my creative career, I also know that I could not have done that without the support of my spouse, because I was the drop off in the morning and he was the pickup, because I was in marketing and advertising and direct marketing. And, my day didn't just stop at 5 o'clock. It went until the project was done, because we had a presentation the next day. So that could be 11 o'clock at night. And so I needed to have that support. Otherwise, I don't think I could have managed my team, much less done the work that was required of me. So
Right.
Thank you for sharing that. That's I think it'll be very insightful for our listeners, and I think it's good that you share that with us.
So you've hired people over the years. Do you see or have any input for people that are coming out of college now who are new hires? Any advice that you might be able to give to them so that they can be successful?
I think my biggest piece of advice would be to embrace the challenges in front of you, to be the problem solver, to raise your hand and do the things that perhaps others don't necessarily want to do. And it's not always a comfortable space. It's certainly not an easy space. And it is a very effective way to get yourself on the radar. And I think a lot of times what I see are individuals who want to stay in their lane. They want to show up, they want to clock in, they want to do the job, they want to clock out. And that's okay. That if that is what you want to do, that is okay. And it is unlikely that you will progress quickly in your career with that mindset. You have to be willing to take on more. And sometimes that means something beyond your immediate scope. Sometimes that means a project that will require additional hours on your part. And I think that is the biggest piece of advice that I have for individuals, is not be afraid to step in and solve the problem.
So along with that, let's say I'm that person in there and I'm trying to further my career and I'm doing those things. How do you go about identifying who's the string puller, as it were, or where you should put your efforts? Because you might work for somebody who doesn't really have that influence. But again, looking at people that are new to the workplace, how would you identify who pulls the strings?
I would actually start with having a conversation with your manager and say, hey, I am super interested in this problem that I'm seeing, or I've noticed that this is a problem. I'm super interested in potentially helping to solve or work on a project to address. Who should I reach out to in order to better understand if this is actually on the roadmap or something that is happening? And you'd be surprised. Often your manager, even if that first point of contact is not the right point of contact, if you continue to pull the thread, you will find the individual who is responsible. But it does require networking on your part. And I actually think this is an invaluable skill, because in networking, right, and going outside of your swim lane, if you will, you are now creating touch points in the organization that will serve you throughout your career, whether it's for this project or for another project. When I was in marketing, I knew several of the engineers. I knew who had access to data. Mm-hmm. And so never be afraid to pull the thread and ask the question, okay, well, do you know if you don't know the answer, do you know somebody who might? And you'd be amazed at where that might lead. So not only are you building your network, but people remember you as a person who is curious, who asks questions, who goes after and doesn't settle.
Interesting. I like that. So how do you go about motivating people? Have you any advice on maybe motivating somebody who needs a little extra push?
It's interesting. It goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about having a vision. And often when I've stepped into roles, there is a complete lack of direction or vision as to where the team is going, where the broader organization is going, even within the more limited scope of the teams that I've managed. And one of the most powerful motivators that I've seen is to put and lay out a vision for people. Hey, this is the way things are today. They don't need to be this way, right? Identify what they find frustrating. And this has to happen through a series of conversations, right? This isn't just stepping in and guessing what the problems are, but working with the leadership team, understanding what their pain points are, and then setting out a vision that helps address those pain points directly, and then engaging that leadership team in being a part of addressing the pain points. And two things will happen. Leaders will either engage and they will want to be a part of the solution, or they will check out. And those leaders, sometimes you can reach them. You can try to understand what it is about the direction that doesn't fit for them or concerns them. Sometimes, though, they just don't, they're done. They don't want to be, either they've been there too long and they just don't believe it, that too many other leaders, is you either help that individual transition to another role or you help them transition out. But at some point as a leader, you have to let go and you have to let individuals make their own decision as to whether or not they want to be part of the solution or not. And so the best thing you can do is lay out a compelling vision and then help the team engage in meaningful ways that allows them to stretch and grow. And that is how I've often approached, whether it's turnarounds or, back when we worked together, it was not the easiest of things, but having a vision of a centralized warranty, it did move the team in a direction. And true story, a couple of years after I left Honeywell, I received an email from one of the managers that had made it through a layoff. And she basically said, if it had not been for that vision, we finally got there, the team would have been in trouble. But because they had consolidated and because they had actually streamlined, they realized the vision, even in my absence toward the end.
That's great.
And so that was actually one of the most, that was a career highlight in a way.
So some of our listeners have asked about imposter syndrome, where they feel like they are asked to do a job and they do not have the confidence or the belief that they can do it themselves. Have you ever been in a position of having that feeling? And if so, can you give any suggestions or insight in maybe how to approach that? Because a lot of times that's the stepping stone that you're talking about, right? To get over a hump or to do something different.
Two things. Start from a place of rebuilding your confidence. You were asked to do that job or asked or selected for that role for a reason. So the leaders around you see that potential, even if you at that point in time may not fully feel confident or comfortable in realizing that potential. The second piece is ask for help. Sit down. What is it that makes you uncomfortable about this space? And it is a place of vulnerability. You are exposing some uncertainty. And there are experts out there who would love to help and share their expertise. So identifying the areas where you lack confidence, because there are going to be in that space, right? Maybe you feel that you've got 70% of it, 60% of it locked down, 30 to 40% of it is new and you're growing into it. Who are experts in that space? Who can you look to as a mirror to help you understand and reflect what it is that you need to present and do in that role? And so I often think that people feel that they're alone when they're in those spaces of uncertainty and lack confidence. And you don't have to be alone. And that is actually, it does require some vulnerability. I think, though, as a person and as a leader, you'll grow. So that would be my advice.
That's great.
So this has been great, but one of the things we always like to end with is, if you had one life lesson that you could give to our listeners, what would that life lesson be, and any other advice you might have beyond that?
I think that it is very true, and it sounds absolutely learn more about yourself, about what you like, what you don't like through failure than you will through success. And it is something that I think people hear throughout their lifetime. It is not a new piece of advice or insight, and there is some real truth. However, for that truth to be realized, you have to do work. You cannot run from your failures. You have to face them full on and understand what went well in this, what did not go well, what am I willing to change in order to grow and learn from this, and how am I going to apply it to the next situation. So there is real powerful learning in messing up, and you have to be willing to look at it in order to take those learnings away. And I think sometimes that's lost a little bit in the messaging of you learn from your failures.
I think that's great. I really do. I think you've talked about a little bit in your own story, how you learn from that. And I really appreciate your candidness on that too, because I think it helps our listeners understand that it's okay not to be perfect at what you do. You have to just keep moving forward and learn from what your mistakes are. So thank you so much for that. We've really enjoyed our conversation with you, Ruffin. Yeah, and we look forward to getting this out to our listeners as soon as possible.
Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for thinking of me.
Yeah, it was good talking to you.
Yep, and great to meet you, Charlene.
All right, bye-bye.
To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Empowered, Life Lessons of Everyday Women. We would really appreciate if you could leave us a rating or a review. If you have any challenges or questions you are facing, we want to hear from you, as we value your input and suggestions. And if you have a compelling story or life lesson you would like to share, please connect with us at empoweredlifelessons@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, other social media platforms, or visit us at empoweredlifelessons.com. In our next episode, meet Michelle B. With over 30 years in the foreign service, including ambassador to the Kingdom of Lesotho, her wealth of experience from working abroad will provide our listeners with incredible perspectives.